paper program to help you with your writing. And my name is Nicholas T. Davis. I'm an author of 7 science fiction books, 4 fantasy books, and 3 children's books. And tonight I want to be talking about copyrights and contracts. But before I do that, I'd like to talk about some news coming up. In March, I'll be out at Finger Lakes Con in Geneva. It's on, I think, at Wasco Lake is the lake out there, and it's right on the lake, right as you go into Geneva. At the, I think it's the Waterfront Hotel, it's called. And I'll be there, and I'll be coming up Thousand Islands Con in June, and there will be Anchor Con in August, and Flower City in September, and I'll be, of course, doing City Market, both downtown and at the fair, and I believe I'll be also doing a Waterloo show on Memorial Day weekend. So that's what I got a little planned so far this year. And I also right now have a book, have the first book, Dimension Lapse. I'm working on an Audible version of that, which will probably be out at the second week of February. So those are just a few of the news, just a little bit of the news going on with me. And I'm also working on the second book of the Joe Garkey series, which will probably be coming out in May. With a little luck, I'll get it done by May. So, and it's called Joe Garkey Battleground. It's the next one. So it should be interesting to see how that pans out. Right now I'm about halfway through the first draft. So, okay, well, without further ado, let's get into our lesson. Alright, tonight we're going to be talking about copyrights. And copyrights aren't to be confused with patents or trademarks. A patent is it's a document to protect a device or a machine or any invention, and a trademark or any invention plus the plans for such an invention or the blueprints for such an invention all fall under a patent. And a trademark is basically a logo for a company, and when you trademark something, nobody can use your logo. Okay, but a copyright is what we need as an author. Copyrights protect the legal rights of all the performing arts. So this includes literary works, musical works, visual artworks. And when you file for the Copyright Office, the form they use for novels and things like that would be TX. And that's Form TX. So when you get on the U.S. copyright site, you'll want Form TX. Okay? And then if you do serials of short works of fiction, like for magazines or for an article or something like that, you want Form SE. Okay, and those are also they both have to do with the writing. Okay, and then if you're going to publish musical works, and this includes any musical songs, sheet music recordings, or soundtracks, you would use Form PA, which is for sheet music, lyrics, movie scores, musical scores, things like that. Form SR is for the actual sound recordings, except for the musicals and movies, because they're part of the whole deal, so they would fall under the PA form. Okay, and then we have the visual artworks, which are any paintings, drawings, sculptures, or architectural works. You would use Form VA. But I usually, with my paintings, I just sell them outright, and I just put my name on it, and that's good enough. I don't really need to copyright my stuff, because there's really I have no problem with somebody copying my work or doing something like that as far as painting goes. So, I mean, lots of people paint scenery, lots of people paint different things. So, anyways, all copyrights after January 1st, 1978 are good for 70 years after the author's death. So when you die, your works are good for 70 years after you die, and nobody can steal them or use them for their own advantage until then. Most copyright forms take about 3 months for the return of the form. You can get the forms right on the website, and you would return the form plus the fee to the website. Excuse me. What's not covered by a copyright? Well, specific words, phrases, titles, or symbols. So any kind of symbol is not covered by a copyright. Any kind of title of a book. You can have two books with the same title, as long as they're not exactly alike. That's fine. I've looked up my own book once, and I think there's like 52 different books with the Library of Congress called Dementia Lapse, so they could all be different, completely different stories and different ideas and stuff like that. So my title's not very uncommon. Anyways, but and after 70 years after your death, the work falls into a public domain. So you know other people can write about your stories. Like during the Wizard of Oz, there's a lot of people. I know Chittenango around here has like a festival every year, and they have special writers who write Oz books, or Oz stories, and that's okay because Frank Baum's long dead, so that's okay. Any collections or anthologies have to be published at the same time to be considered an collection rather. If you're doing book by book like I do, you have to pay for each individual copyright. Unless you write them all once. If you write them all first and then publish them, then you can publish them as a collection. And it is a little cheaper to publish them as a collection, but a lot of writers don't like to write that way because you'd have to write all the books first. I think J.R. Tolkien did that though. He wrote the Lord of the Rings all once and then published it together, I think, if I remember right. And it was many years. He spent like 25 years gathering it all together. So, okay, and unpublished works can be done online. Okay, so if you're going to do them online, you can send the file to the Library of Congress if it's unpublished, and you don't have to send them an actual physical copy. That you can just send them like an electronic copy, and that's okay with them. But any published works, like the books I have or anything like that, once you publish them, and you can publish them without copyright nowadays, you do it through Amazon, and I'll get into that a little more later. Or you can do it through Amazon or any of the self-publishing companies. Okay, and you must submit 2 published copies of the work plus the fee. So you would have to send them 2 of your books that are finished plus the fee. And the fee is usually $65 per song. I mean I shouldn't say per song, per book. So it's going to be $65 per book. I say per song because I also write music. So and I think that used to be $35 a song, but I don't know what it is now. It could be a lot more now. Could be like 65 like the other one. And the paper filing fee, if you send it by paper application, it's $125. Don't ask me why it's almost double. I think because all the materials they got to go over or whatever, but it's doubled. Okay, And that's all I have to say about copyrights. Tonight's not going to be a very long program because I don't have a lot to cover tonight, but I have a few things to cover, so we'll continue. The next thing I want to talk about is publishing contracts. Okay, and if you're self-published, you don't really need a contract. Your contract is basically your agreement with your self-publishing company that you're using. It could be Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Lulu, Smashwords, whatever you're using. Those are some of the ones that do it. There are others, but those are the four that I would trust the most. I mean, there are other ones out there, but they're liable to just take your money and go run with it, the self-publishing ones. The thing about self-publishing is you own all the rights. Basically, you're just paying them a fee to put it on their site, and you're paying like a 40% fee to put it on their site, but the rest of the royalties go directly to you. So you get most of the royalties, and that's a basic contract you would give with anybody. Basically, with Barnes and Noble, they do the same thing. They take like a certain percentage of the book, and they assign you a base cost per book, and they take the money out of that. So okay, and Lulu's the same way. Smashwords, you can put it on for free, but I believe on Smashwords the vetting process is a lot more complex, and I remember I pulled it from Smashwords for that reason, because it was very, very complex. Okay, most companies, like I said, they have a 60-40 split. And the good thing about self-publishing is you control all the ordering and sales. So you can order 5 books, you can order 500 books. It all depends on what you want to order. It's up to you what you want to do with that. So, and there's no cancellation through the companies unless the company folds. So Amazon, I assume, is going to be around for a long time. So I'm not really in any danger of losing my contract with them, or my books with them, because I know they're going to be around a while. I mean, the stock price alone is like $3,000 right now on Amazon, so it's not going anywhere for a while. Okay, and Amazon has exclusive electronic rights. Other than that, you can publish on multiple platforms. So you can publish through Lulu, you can publish through Amazon, you can publish through Barnes & Noble all once. But if you do that electronic one, like Kindle, Kindle has to be on Kindle. You can't go to another platform, because Amazon will basically strip you from their platform if you do that. So you have to be careful with that. And Amazon's kind of funny about those things. But I will say Amazon has very good support. When you call them, you have a problem, they're right there. I mean, a few times I had books that weren't they didn't come out right, and they were quick to send me new ones, and they didn't charge me for them either, so that was good. Okay, and all the above companies, all those companies they have their own rights for copywriting. So you own the copyright, but they basically protect the copyright from other people trying to steal it. But there have been instances where there have been scammers, and they have gone after them, and they've caught some, and some have gotten away. So you have to be careful with that. And the scammers usually put a copy of your book on another website, and it's really not your book at all. It's just a ploy to get money off the people, and the book's an empty book, basically. Okay, but you want to avoid that if you can. Okay, now there's another way to self-publish, and that's through a publishing company, through a self-publishing company. And they usually charge most of the production costs involved in making the book, they usually charge back to you, depending on, you know, the arrangement and based on the number of copies. You can receive up to 40% royalties with these companies, but more often it might be less. You know, it depends on, you know, who you go with and how they work out their contracts. And I'm not going to get into specific contracts tonight. I'm just talking about contracts in general. If you have to get into a law class, if you want to get into specific contracts. I took contract law in college, and it was a very difficult course, believe me. Okay, and you have to order multiple copies from these people, usually 500 to 2,000 books. But sometimes they will give you like a deal, you know, where you can order less, you know, it depends. Okay. And they only offer like temporary support, usually 6 months, or, you know, some of these companies may not do this. I don't know. I have a couple of friends who go through certain presses, and they may tell me different. I don't know. You know, it just all depends on the company itself. These are just what I'm going by, what I've read about on the internet and stuff. And they usually ask you to sign a one-time contract to publish a certain amount of copies or a specific book. Only will continue if the demand is there. So if you're not selling a lot of books, they might drop you, or they might, you know, ask you to, you know, reconsider, or they might discontinue the book. You know, that's a possibility too. And that's another good thing about, you know, the self-publishing, the other one, because the books don't get discontinued. Okay, and that brings us to the other one, traditional publishing companies. And these are the ones you send in a query and all that, and you wait for an acceptance, and you can't send out to other publishers because your certain book is wrapped up with one publisher, and you have to wait like 4 months. And I used to do it this way too, and it takes forever. I mean, you send the book in, it takes 4 months to hear anything, and then they reject you, and then you have to move on to the next person and the next person. And, you know, it's a long process. Okay, and they usually charge all the production costs involved in making the book based on the number of copies. You can usually, you know, there are some that used to do the whole production costs, but as, you know, paper got more expensive and printing got more expensive, I think a lot of them ask the author to contribute as well to the production now. And like with these, you can receive up to 40% royalties as well, but sometimes they're less, okay? And a lot of times they're a lot less. I mean, you know, if you're a beginning author, you know, they can retain the copyrights and receive the royalties, and, you know, that means you can't publish with anybody else. And sometimes it's only like 8 to 10 cents per word, you know, minus the production costs. And they own the rights to the publishing. Any future version of published works must be cleared through that company. So if you want to relinquish your rights to the company, you can be freed from the contract, or you can basically, you know, if you want to go to another publisher, it has to be a mutual thing. The publishing company have to agree to it, and you have to agree to it too. Or you can just leave them after, you know, they discontinue the book, you just leave them and go to another publishing company. But the publishing company only continues with authors who bring income to the company. So like those big ones like Penguin Books and stuff like that, if you don't do well, like Stephen King did, you know, book after book after book, they may drop you, you know, and then you have to go to somebody else, you have to start over or whatever. And they only offer like 6 months support unless the book does well. So, and all restrictions and provisions are added in the contract. So, whatever the contract is, they'll add the restrictions into it. Okay, then we can talk about vanity publishers. Vanity publishers take an upfront fee to produce a certain number of books, and I advise you to stay away from the vanity publishers because a lot of times they're rip-offs. They take your money. It's usually like $3,000 to $5,000. They only offer a little bit of support, and then you're stuck with 2,000 books that you are sitting in your garage and you're not selling, or maybe you are selling them, but either way, you're stuck with a whole crap load of books. I did that when I was doing telephone books. I ended up with a half garage full of telephone books after a while, Okay. And next thing we're going to talk about is agents. And agents, I really don't think you need an agent unless you're selling over like 20,000 copies a year. If you're selling that well, then an agent would be a good idea. And an agent, what does an agent do? Well, an agent locates publishing agencies willing to take your books. They manage any public relations, television, or radio appearances. They take care of speaking engagements or book signings. They review the author's work. They provide editorial guidance. They develop a strategy for publication. They can be an advisor on the publishing industry, market the work and the rights to appropriate publishers, and they monitor your royalties. And they do all those things, and they usually charge a fee for their services or a percentage of your royalties, however they do it. Okay? And when you're writing for short fiction and articles, short stories for them, you may be asked to relinquish your rights. Once you sell the story, the right goes to the publisher. Now, this is something you have to decide whether you want to do or not, because if it's part of a bigger anthology, you might not want to do that because you might want an anthology later. So, it's entirely up to you with those, because those types of jobs are usually pay per article. So, you can either sell the article or leave it alone and put it in an anthology. That's up to you. Okay? So, but if you want to retain your rights, and then above all, you have to retain your rights. As an author, retain your rights. Include a provision in your will for your arrangement of your royalties to go to your beneficiaries. So, and I'm in the process of doing this myself. If you want one of your relatives to have the rights to your books, or you have another writer in mind you want to pass them to, then you need to provide it in your will that those are your wishes, because that will protect the copyright, as well. Okay, and never sign contracts that relinquish your rights without your consent. So that goes back to the article thing. Unless you're totally okay with it, don't give up the rights to your books. And then the last is copyright all the books with the U.S. Copyright Service. And every time you write a book, make sure you copyright. And you can do this in the process of writing a book. If you're writing a book, send it for the copyright, and it will be protected until it, is published. And then when it is published, then you're all set. Okay. So, well, that's all I have for today. Next week we'll be talking about networking competition, and that's basically working together as a team with authors, and working alone, and what to look out for, and what works out best for you. So, but before I go, over all this month, I have my special again. my starter kit, and start your year out right with my starter kit. You get 2 science fiction books, Dimension Lapse and Tolkien Connection, and 1 fantasy book, my Bargo Lyndon book, out of my Bargo Lyndon series, Venture of a Lifetime. And these books are all $20 on my website, which is nicholasTdavisbooks.com, and it's $20 plus shipping and handling. You can order them right through me, and you'll get a signed copy too, not unsigned copy. And I guess that's all I have for tonight. So I hope you enjoyed the lesson. We'll see you again next week. Have a good night, everybody.